in this 1954 election, a new organization came onto the scene. A new organization came onto the scene. The 1954 election, you had the NLM, was just the National Liberation Movement of a man called Dr. Kofe Busia. This is important. This is an important Kofe. This name,
Kofe Annan.
yeah, Kofe is a very popular Ghanaian name. Kofi Annan, Kofi, not tea. Okay. Want coffee. We don't want tea. So there were clashes between the CPP and the NLM. The NLM, as I said, was established in 54 with its power base in Kumasi.
Okay.
Kumasi.
Yeah.
Kumasi is the heartland of the Asante people.
Okay.
And the NLM drew many dissatisfied CPP members. The NLM was supported by wealthy coffee growers in that area, because that's where the coffee country is, the cocoa country, sorry. And they were against a strong unitary government. They were for a federal structure,
Okay.
so that they could have more autonomy for the Asante, in the Asante country, okay? There were intense battles in the Asante region. If you can go and look at the map of Ghana closely, do go and check out that area. I've got a very good map of Ghana, but I didn't bring it along. So the colonial government had to be the referee in the conflicts between the NLM and the CPP. As I said, the NLM was supported by Asante farmers and by young men who had left the CPP, the equivalent of the EFF. They had young firebrands who were dissatisfied with the CPP. They were also supported by the former UGC and ex-CPP members seeking revenge against Nkrumah. Nkrumah had a very strong and was very strong and charismatic and could alienate people very easily. At first, the CPP didn't take this organization very seriously. Then there were more in the last elections that led now to independence. So you had election 51, where Nkrumah becomes leader of government business. Then in 54 you had an election, and then again in 56 you had an election. So the Ghanaians theoretically was used to elections by the time they got independence. In 56 was the last election that gave them independence, and the NLM won a majority in Asante country. Okay. So they also used ethnicity, I'm sure. In that final election, the CPP of Nkrumah won only 52% of the votes, and the opposition 43%, which is very tight, isn't it? So you can see Nkrumah coming to power was actually on a very slim majority, and especially if you look at the low turnout, only 50% of registered voters cast their vote. This is
Again.
unbelievable.
In 56 again.
And then only 30% of the population were registered voters. So it was a very, very low participation rate in your first independent country in Africa. It's something that should be studied, because one would think the excitement about elections, was it logistics? Was it consciously a product of the British, neglecting this, or the political parties? Because it's very low and it's very close. In any case, the day of independence for Ghana was the 7th of March, 1957. Now, Nkrumah was more, I've told you this before, he was more of a Pan-Africanist than a Ghanaian nationalist.
Yeah.
He was called, and he wanted to be called, Africa's man of destiny. And he was more concerned with West African federalist ideas. He wanted to create this notion of the United States of Africa. And he began with West Africa, to create a federation of West African states. And he paid more attention to that than to internal issues in his country. Okay, so he traveled extensively. He gave place to liberation movements. It was an exciting time. If you speak to people who were in Ghana in those days, in the late 50s and the 60s, it was an attraction for all the freedom movements from Africa. Many South Africans were there. I think it wasn't Maria Makeba even a representative for the Ghana at the UN.
Mm-hmm.
Many African Americans went there. The great African American intellectual W.E.B. Du Bois. You must read his books. His book, The Soul of the Black Folk. The Soul of the Black Folk. He moved there and he was buried there. So it was this beacon of hope. Lots of all the liberation movements from Portuguese Africa were there. But he neglected the country internally. In 1965, Nkrumah threw J.B. Dankwa into prison. And along with another 1,300 Ghanaians who were a problem to him. But,
Who's this Chinikwanka?
J.B. Dankwa,
Okay,
the
that's
founder
it, the
of the
founder.
UGCC,
Okay.
the man who brought him over to run
Yeah.
the UGCC.
Okay.
They were being problematic to him. They were not towing the line. And in February 1966, whilst he was on a trip to Eastern Europe, he was overthrown. He was overthrown, and he couldn't come back to country, and he went to Guinea, Conakry, where a man by the name of Sekou Touré, very interesting figure. Yeah, Yaya Touré, that was from Mali.
Kenya.
Sekou Touré from Guinea. Guinea Conakry. Guinea is a small country here. Guinea Conakry. It's south of Senegal. There's Guinea-Bissau, which was Portuguese, which had the great anti-colonial hero by the name of Amilcar Cabral. And then you have Guinea-Conakry, where the leader was Sekou Touré. And when he couldn't come back to the country because of the coup, Sekou Touré invited him to become the joint president of Guinea. It's the only case in history I know of where you invite somebody from another country to be a joint president.